Homeland Security just slowly cruising down Main Street, took a picture of it. The guy stopped, stared him down, was like, "You got a problem?" And he was like, "I'm taking a picture, is that illegal?" And the guy just, stayed there for like several minutes blocking traffic, acting like a tough guy.
Well, when I was, I do refrigeration, and I was on top of the Sonic restaurant in Gunnison, and I saw a Homeland Security vehicle pull into the parking lot right across the street. Well, I climbed down, went across the street, went into the restaurant, went right up to the table where they were eating and sat down with them. I said, "What are you guys doing in town? What's your jurisdiction?" "Well, we're just moving the car from Montrose to Denver." I said, "What's your authority and jurisdiction?" "Well, violations of tax law," and he had a very short list. So if you see a Department of Homeland Security vehicle cruising around, they don't have jurisdiction.
And we need to ask them.
And we need to confront them and let them know that we know. Because what they're doing is, this is a bluff. They're bluffing. They're bluffing. So we need to call their bluff before we just accept willy-nilly that they have the authority. We need to let them know that we know they don't have the authority, and we need to do it non-violently.
David?
Yes, sir?
Is it Cole versus the United States? Is that the Cole brothers?
I don't know.
No, it's not the right spelling.
Cole brothers.
All right, so the acquisition of jurisdiction is dependent on the consent of or cession of jurisdiction by the state. If the state did not cede it, the federal government doesn't have it.
Right.
The federal lands are only held in trust by the federal government, but the state of Colorado never relinquished jurisdiction. And if it doesn't, if you can't find it in Title III, the federal government doesn't have it. They're very, very limited. And in this, here's the three methods for federal acquisition of jurisdiction. Okay, constitutional consent that the state gives pursuant to the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. 2, a federal reservation of jurisdiction over property originally acquired by a federal government and later made part of a state admitted to the Union. And 3, state cession of legislative jurisdiction over property within its borders with at least one applicable exception, the right to serve a criminal and civil process. That's the means by which the federal government gets jurisdiction. Unless, by a Cloward and Piven strategy, they can collapse the entire infrastructure and get around the law, because they're working from a place of chaos and anarchy, which is what I believe that this government's up to. I think that right now they're creating such a sense of uneasiness in this country that the people might just give up on everything, thinking that there's no chance. And isn't that where most people are today? Okay, the United States may also obtain a jurisdiction by reserving it when sovereign title is transferred to the state upon its entry into the Union, or by cession of jurisdiction after the United States has otherwise acquired the property. Okay, was sovereign title ever actually transferred? Again, if it was, it would be in Colorado law. This is not something that they can hide. It's got to be part of the law of the state, and that's where you would find it. Constitutional phrase, exclusive legislation, is the equivalent of the statutory expression, exclusive jurisdiction. Okay, let me come down here. This is inside this report, inventory report of federal jurisdictions within the state. This is a 1962 report following up, a follow-up of the 1957 report. And let's see, here, Mesa County is number 77. I don't know if I actually put Mesa in here. Here's all the places where the federal government has jurisdiction within Delta. And 4 would be the proprietary interest code, and 1 would be exclusive legislative jurisdiction. In other words, it belongs to the federal government and they have all power. They have power over the post office. Here, what is that? Can you read that from back here? Can't read that either, but it's number 4, and this is a number 4. The airport's a 4. Gunnison, post office is a 1. Here's Mesa County. Okay, the Interior Department is a number 4. The National Park Service is a number 4. Bureau of Reclamation, number 4. Grand Valley Project, 4. Fish and Wildlife, 4. Post Office is a 1. 4 means proprietary interest. 1 means exclusive legislative jurisdiction. Federal Aviation Agency, 4. Glade Park, 4. Housing and Finance, Public Housing Administration, 4. Oh, Grand Junction Operational Headquarters, 1. Atomic Energy Commission, Grand Junction Operational Headquarters. They have exclusive jurisdiction there. Here's some more. Bureau of Land Management, 4. National Park Service. Dinosaur National Monument, 4.
David, what was 1 again?
Exclusive legislative jurisdiction.
Veterans Administration?
No. So there's a lot of 1s going on there. Or a lot of 4s, I mean. So, and again, here's Dinosaur. This was taken, this is a snapshot back in 1962. If we update it to this is 2011, Dinosaur National Monument, which was on here as a number 4, right there, according to I think that's 1935 or 1915. Dinosaur has been upgraded to concurrent jurisdiction under Article 3.
Is it before that particular statute right there, everything else that was, there's a different part of that says these have been ceded. And that part just says concurrent jurisdiction. Not a ceding, but a concurrent jurisdiction. That's the way I'm reading it, and that's why I'm saying that you need to sort of determine the difference between ceding and concurrent jurisdiction, in my opinion.
Well, okay, ceding is the
Maybe that's
process
the
of,
difference between 1 and 4.
ceding is, okay, concurrent legislative jurisdiction under the laws of the state is ceded. It's the jurisdiction itself that is ceded, not the land. It's the jurisdiction over the land that's ceded.
But if it's concurrent, that means, again, it's state and federal.
Therein lies the excellent question. Where does the power of the state versus the power of the federal government, when they're operating concurrently, where's
Yeah, if they haven't ceded the land, though, it just seems to me that,
the question, here's the question to ask the sheriff. If a murder occurs upon the national monument, who has jurisdiction over it?
well, it happens all the time when people commit suicide, who goes and investigates?
Who goes and investigates
The
it?
sheriff.
The sheriff.
There, then that tells you who has jurisdiction.
Right.
So police power, which is the power of the state to exercise criminal laws, and it's the power of the state to protect the public health, safety, and welfare, that power was not granted to the federal government. The federal government does not have police power.
Well, but the way that the Monument Park Service said it to me is there's a mutual aid agreement in place.
Well,
Yeah.
I'd like to see that. But, we're going deeper than that. We're going into the fact that the federal government was never granted police power by the federal constitution.
Right, but they're carrying guns and arrest powers up there as well. But wouldn't that be a simple thing for the sheriff to say, I gave them?
He can't, no, there's a right way to do that, and it's according to the law. The sheriff can't grant them jurisdiction. I don't care what mutual aid compact he may think he is entered into.
Well, let me take it back.
Okay.
Actually, the Colorado legislator, I think it's 4 or 5 bills, Jeff, that I came up with, where they've allowed federal jurisdiction to enact state statutes, Colorado state statute, federal government officials. I'd have to get the bills.
Yeah.
But SB 13 was this last legislative session.
Okay,
Before that was Department of Homeland Security, ATF, all the big federal agencies, law enforcement arms of the federal government have state powers now granted to them.
look, that's something we
There's
really,
legislative power.
we need to look at that. I know the Secret Service was given that.
Right, just recently, that was the most recent one.
Okay, so.
There's like 2 others that include ATF,
Department of
U.S.
Homeland
Marshals. The Department of Home Security one is kind of oddly written, but it clearly says ATF,
Yeah, but let me tell you
DEA,
how-
U.S. Marshals,
DHS is
FBI.
it may be awkwardly written in there, but if you look at how this, like I was telling you about these state grants and these that have been accepted, the Department of Homeland Security now, if you look at the state of Colorado, they have their own Department of Homeland Security label, DHS, under state. And it's all been set up via government grants, just like, our healthcare exchange was the same way.
So what you're saying is they're getting around the Constitution through interagency compacts,
Correct.
where DHS, which is a bureaucracy, has entered into an interagency contract with the state of Colorado DHS, and so this is where they claim to get their jurisdiction. So that's not constitutional at all.
Plus the governor. I say the governor's complicit in that. Hickenlooper's complicit in it.
Yeah, I mean, he's accepted the grants, he's set up he's moved everything under that whole, he's put all this stuff under the DHS label now. If you look back at how they've moved all that, it is becoming this very centralized power and control.
Okay, these things need to
state
be
level.
challenged. If we just allow that without challenging it based upon the principles of jurisdiction.
But our local sheriff supported the latest one with Secret Service. I mean, he wrote a memo to.
And most of the Colorado sheriffs supported it for some reason.
I think giving them the benefit of the doubt, I think they don't understand the principles of the Declaration of Independence and the principles of the separation of powers and the distinctions between state and federal jurisdiction. And they're going along with the program thinking that they're doing something right, and they're being used by some unscrupulous few who know exactly what they're up to. And so in order to get around the jurisdictional boundaries, they're having to usurp it using contracts and offers of subsidies to do what they can't do according to the principles of constitutional law.
Hopefully everyone can come next week when Jared Wright is here. One of the things we're going to ask is maybe ask him to sponsor a bill. We also asked Ray Scott and Steve King to come to sponsor a bill to overturn basically Steve King's legislation giving all these agencies arrest powers.
Let me ask you too, kind of in the same spirit that you said Delta County Airport was a 4. Would in Mesa County, would our Walker Field be a 4 as well? And if so, how then does TSA with police powers fit in that equation?
I personally don't believe that TSA has jurisdiction.
They don't.
I got on an airplane about a year ago, and Karen was there. All I had with me was a electric bill, thank you, Steve, and a voter registration. And I went out and showed that to the TSA guy, and he says, no, we need some ID. And I said, no, this was good enough to vote. This is good enough to get on an airplane. 3 times he asked me, 3 times I said, this is my ID. He called his supervisor over. 3 times he asked me, 3 times it was my ID. He called his supervisor over. The third supervisor said, go ahead and get on the airplane. I did it going to Las Vegas and coming back. My only regret is that I showed him any ID at all. Because I don't think that they have the jurisdiction to impair an obligation of contract that I had with the airlines. Now, the TSA was set up here, but once I got through the lines of TSA, the sheriff was sitting back here. Now, the sheriff has jurisdiction over that airport because nowhere in here has any airport been ceded to the federal government. And so, no, I don't believe for a second that the TSA has jurisdiction. And again, that's another bluff.
But it's already been ruled in the court that they have no federal jurisdiction. That's on Jesse Ventura's website.
Thanks, Linda. And one more quick, and then I'm going to move on. Here's Gunnison National Forest inside the report, and it's listed as a 4. Here is White River National Forest. It's listed as a 4. Here's Rocky Mountain National Park. It's listed as a 3. Sand Dunes National Monument is listed as a 4. So we have a lot of 4s where we thought they had supremacy. Now, the distinction is important because the sheriff has jurisdiction. And we told the county commissioners in Montrose, and actually, I don't know, no, I told the county commissioner in Gunnison last week, who is having a real hard time just believing that this is actually possible. Because they were wanting to reopen a road that was being washed out by beaver ponds. And I said, well, with all due respect, Commissioner, you have the power of nuisance. You can declare a nuisance and exercise the power that was given to you as a county commissioner to send a crew in there and clean up the national forest where it is destroying a county road. So that commissioners don't completely get how powerful they are yet. The sheriff doesn't completely get how powerful he is yet. But through the process of, like in this case of up in Pitkin, we had a road open. The district ranger opened it for us. And then now in Montrose, the county commissioners and the sheriffs are beginning to get their mind around this, and we're continuing to push for a resolution, which is not really necessary, but for them it's a huge step. The ramifications of this are staggering, because what it means is we get our country back. We get our counties back, we get our sheriffs back, we get the commissioners working for the people, and we won't see federal roadblocks out here on the highways. We won't see the Gestapo running around the country, which is the direction that we're going with the Department of Homeland Security. So if we can use our sheriffs and commissioners to stand up where they have the authority, and then the men and the women of the community get behind their local control, the sheriff and the county commissioners, I think we stand a chance. And I think the Western Slope is very likely that this is going to happen. As long as I can continue to speak, this is what I'm championing. Barbara, you were wanting to say something?
In visiting with Sheriff McKee in Delta, they supported that Secret Service because of the ATF already being in place and that other, and not understanding jurisdiction, and because Steve King supported that.
And Steve King wants to be sheriff?
Yeah. So it's a very dangerous thing if the sheriff thinks that, okay, the people elect the sheriff to represent them, but the sheriff is torn between two opinions. He's torn between the oath of office that he took and the misrepresentation of the school of thought that has been foisted upon the American people that the federal government is supreme. And so until this distinction is clarified in their minds, I believe they're operating in good faith, which makes them very dangerous. So if we can demonstrate to them that they actually have the power to not comply with federal mandates, and we can stand behind them and educate them in that vein, then it provides an element of safety that right now we don't have. Yeah, this is a scary conversation, but it involves the sheriff's desire to know the truth.
And we'll be winning when we see sheriffs and commissioners at a meeting like this. That's when we know we'll be winning.
So right now, this sounds extreme because of the degree of the extremity that we've come off these fundamental principles. But this is the jurisdiction is actually the road back home. That was the point, so that you will all know, that was the point of reopening Cushman Creek Road. Okay? We're so entrenched in our mind that we're more interested in being right and looking good, or avoiding looking bad and being wrong, that we maintain the status quo for personal safety's sake. So until some of us are willing to go out and do something like go and reopen a road like we did, and then stand in the gap and be willing to suffer, and I think this is a scriptural principle. Submit your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, for this is your reasonable service. Until the people can step up and do something nonviolent and force a conversation that would not otherwise happen, then that elephant in the room is going to remain